everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and welcome back to the all-seeing and cosmically aware Comic Vault. Today we're taking a look at a lot of people's favorite installment of the Amalgam line. This is Dr. Strangefate, one of my favorite titles. I just love mashing those two things together and not even bothering to come up with some other name. It's Dr. Strange, it's Dr. Fate, it's Dr. Strangefate, and the way that title fits in with what's going on here is also really cool. This is, of course, Dr. Strange and Dr. Fate mashed together with also a surprise character, and we find out at the end that this is neither of the original characters that wore the mantle of Doctor Strange or Dr. Fate, but is yet a third person, and we'll talk about who that is here in a little bit. And of course, as always, I spoil these, so if you want to go read this first before you find out what that is, it's kind of the coolest reveal so far of these that I've read, and I thought it was a really neat idea. Becomes a little bit problematic, especially as far as, well, mostly as far as superpowers are concerned, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So the idea here is we are, with one of these, finally broaching the fact that two universes were put together in order to create this. And it's kind of fun trying to look at this from the perspective of someone that has always read Amalgam comics as if DC and Marvel didn't exist, because there's a little bit of a fun kind of meta thing that's done with these, where really tongue-in-cheekly in the letters pages, we pretend like our universe has also been altered by these two cosmic entities coming together and putting DC and Marvel together as one universe, where there's all these books we've never heard of, and these characters go back for decades and decades, and people these fake letters in the letters pages talking about these characters like these are what we've always had. And so if you pretend like you are someone that has been reading these forever, because it tries to kind of put you, a lot of these other books try to put you in that mindset a little bit, it's fun to consider the fact that you're supposed to be someone reading this that wouldn't understand what it was talking about with these other two universes, that it would be a big, to anybody who was altered by this universe, reading this, it would be a big revelation to them. It would be a big surprise that this universe was actually just two other universes sandwiched together. And of course, this really is just some supplementary material stacking on top of DC versus Marvel, if you're reading this from the perspective of, I just read DC versus Marvel. And in fact, this issue was included in the trade for that, and I think that's really appropriate, and I'm glad that that's there. And it's one of the few things that raises a couple of ethical questions about what it means to put these universes together and then to pull them back apart. And are we maybe, and it doesn't really go into this real hard. It doesn't explore this, but the idea is there, and the question is kind of raised of, because these universes were put together and created new people, there's this kind of identity question and a lot of both metaphysical and existential questions, where if you take these two universes apart, are you actually killing these characters that it created in order to restore the characters and these universes that you had before? And that was the thing that I really kind of wished that the main title had dealt with, that main miniseries had brought to the table. And this issue broaches it, and I think it's cool that we get anything about it at all. This is written by Ron Mars with art by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. And Mars, of course, wrote half of Marvel vs. DC, and Peter David wrote the other half, and so I'm glad that one of them got to do this one in particular. So the idea here is, and it's just really fun looking at this from the perspective of this character specifically. The idea is Dr. Strangefate is trying to do exactly the opposite of what our heroes kind of need to happen in DC versus Marvel, which is to pull these our universes back apart in order to, again, restore all of these characters. And he just wants to keep his universe together, the universe that he knows that from his perspective is the way it should be, the way it always has been. And he brings in his three most trusted agents in order to go also grab Access, who has, of course, wound up in the Amalgam universe himself and is just trying to survive. And he's being chased by a monster at the beginning of this, who is the Abominite, who is a cross between the Abomination and a Superman villain that I wasn't familiar with. I had to go look this up. I think he's called the Helgramite. I looked that up earlier, and I think I'm right about that. And that's a character that showed up in a Supergirl episode that I wasn't even familiar with. But anyway, so there are some kind of fun excuses here and there, and sometimes it's a little bit intrusive to give us some more amalgamated characters in this so that it isn't just a conversation between Dr. Strangefate and Access. And of course, this is the first of these I've read so far where Access shows up, Axel, and I don't know if he's in any more of these, and again, of course, I haven't read all these yet. Of course, there's the All Access miniseries that was published the year after that. We'll get to that when we finish with all the 96 stuff, but that's not technically Amalgam. It's in Amalgam, but it's more or less sort of, and it's been a long time since I've read that, but more or less it's sort of a sequel to Marvel vs. DC, but it's still, while all that's going on. So I guess it's an Amalgam thing. It just doesn't have the Amalgam logo on it. It's DC and Marvel again. But anyway, I digress. So we've got these three characters: Skulk, Bruce Banner, who I think is supposed to be a mix between the Hulk and Solomon Grundy. He's Bruce Banner, but this very kind of rough and tumble version who doesn't seem nerdy and sciencey at all. He wears kind of a John Constantine trench coat, and then, but when he hulks out, he just turns into Solomon Grundy, or what looks like Solomon Grundy. And then you have Jade Nova, who is just Jade from DC and Nova from Marvel. And Jade's not a character I'm familiar with. She's I think a Green Lantern, and in this, Jade Nova wears a Green Lantern ring. And then you have Wanda Zatara, who's the White Witch, and she is, of course, Zatanna mixed in with Scarlet Witch, and they're kind of just an excuse to have some more characters in this and to get to play with to make up some kind of mystical characters or and some monsters and things, and in order to flesh out the mystical and occult part of this world a little bit. And they are charged with grabbing Access, and I like that Mix, and I like his name because it's Amalgam. The right hand man of Dr. Strangefate. He asked the question I'm asking after they leave, which is, why don't you just go get him yourself? You're all powerful. He talks about himself as the most powerful being there is on the planet, and he says he wants to watch from afar and that he's using pawns. The pawns go first, and he wants to find out what the strengths and weaknesses are of his opponent before he goes after his opponent. And Access kind of plays for Dr. Strangefate as the bad guy of this piece, which is really interesting. And of course, he's not a villain at all, but from Dr. Strangefate's perspective, he looks at him as this unfortunate innocent bystander that stands in the way of keeping his universe together, and he's supposed to have the shards that would make it possible. And of course, this plays in the DC versus Marvel book, as I talked about when I reviewed that. The shards that would make it possible to bring the two universes back out again, and to separate them again. And so he's the most dangerous thing to Dr. Strangefate right now and to the Amalgam universe. And so that's the whole reason that he sends these characters, and he has this very kind of manipulative, work from the shadows kind of attitude. And when you finally find out who he is, that's kind of interesting. He turns out at the end to be Professor Xavier, and there's kind of a neat foreshadowing moment to that. You get a good clue, and I didn't call it at all. And I think Mars does a really good job of making you wonder who's under the helmet, because he never takes the helmet off. And just the way it's drawn, I guess I'm giving Mars credit for that, but I should also give Garcia Lopez credit for that, because both of them are doing things that kind of build suspense for that and really make you wonder who's behind that helmet. It feels like we're making a really big deal out of the fact, just on the page, that he never takes the helmet off, and when he finally does, it turns out to be Charles Xavier, and the inherent implications in that, I think, are really interesting, but the foreshadowing moment I was talking about is he mentions that he was already able to read men's minds and tell things about people before he was trained in the mystic arts. And it never occurred to me that, that means he has superpowers and he has Professor Xavier's abilities. And that becomes problematic by the end, because I'm not sure why he wasn't able to tell that Access doesn't have the shards with him. The reason he's after Access is because he thinks he has them on his person. And he's able to tell Access all these things about himself because he can read his mind, but he doesn't know that. And then at the very end, when Access leaves, he just quits being Dr. Strangefate. He just puts the helmet down and says, okay, I give up. I guess I can't do anything about keeping my universe together, and I lose. The end. And I didn't know why he didn't try to, he's super powerful. I don't know why he doesn't try to go after the shards. I don't know why he doesn't try to find some leads, find some connections to Access and anybody else that might know where the shards are. I don't know if I'm missing something here, but this play is, unlike a lot of these other issues, is less of just is just kind of a window into this world where you don't really get a story so much as just a setup for this part, this pocket of the universe, and then each of these issues together, when you look at them all, kind of build this really cool universe that kind of expand this world, but you don't get a lot of real stories. This is a little closer to an actual story, and when you get to the end, it just kind of stops, and it's not because you would read more of it necessarily, it's just because he's only got 22 pages to work with, and ultimately Dr. Strangefate can't be too much of a threat because we have to pull these universes back apart again. I think it would have been really cool if he had played in the main Marvel vs. DC story somehow, and he was kind of more of the big thing that was holding them together, and they had to there was some kind of a big fight with him or something, and so anyway, I thought that was kind of odd. I don't know why he just gives up at the end like he does, but inherently the implications of Professor Xavier being Dr. Strangefate, I think, are really cool, because Xavier is, of course, all about peaceful cohabitation and unity, and of course he's that way with two different races, with mutants and humans, but here it's with two different continuities, and he wants to continue to see the harmony between DC and Marvel. And I like the idea that he knows that those universes were sandwiched together, but he wants to keep this world together because I guess I'm sure there's some selfish motivations. He won't be himself if that's pulled apart. He won't be Dr. Strangefate anymore. But also, all these other people that he knows, and it won't be who they are, and the world will just be different and, to his mind, wrong. It's what he's always known. So even though he knows what the origin of the universe is, he doesn't care. He's got to keep it together. And just the idea of that being Xavier, I think, is kind of a neat idea. I also like that the name... there's a little bit more going on with the title of this than just it's Doctor Strange and Dr. Fate, and so you put them together. These two universes being stuck together like that is a strange fate, and of course ultimately it's not fate, it's not destiny. They are destined to be pulled back apart, mostly because this is all being informed by the real commercial world. DC and Marvel can't be the same company forever. We love these characters separated too much. We can't do this forever, and so it would be a strange fate if they were to stay together, but ultimately that can't happen, and I like that idea a lot too. This is easily my favorite of these so far. I really enjoyed it. I still don't understand why he so easily gives up at the end, and that's kind of my biggest complaint about this, and it's just like Ron Mars does quite a bit with 22 pages, but it's really I still see it as kind of unfortunate that there wasn't a little bit more real estate with some of these, and that we couldn't tell more of kind of real stories as opposed to just get your feet wet in this world and then imagine what would happen afterward. And that's working better in some of these than others. Like I said, this is, I think, my favorite of these, mostly just because that reveal at the end is really super cool. And I think Garcia Lopez's art is pretty decent enough. Fits really well. This kind of gritty, grounded style juxtaposed with the mysticism, I think is certainly working really well. It reminds me of Vertigo stuff. It looks at a little bit like that. Axel himself, I should mention, doesn't get a whole lot of fleshing out in this. I don't know who he is any more than I do in the DC versus Marvel book. He does continue to be kind of just a story device, and he gets out of jams by standing there and his powers teleporting him whenever anything bad happens to him. So he has kind of literal plot armor. He just transports whenever something bad happens to him, and there's just not a whole lot to his character. But Strangefate himself is kind of interesting, and like I said, I just wish we got to do more with him. But anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Sure appreciate it, and I'll be back with you with some more Amalgam on Monday. Thanks for watching, and happy reading.